Hello everyone! Welcome to an X chapter driving video where today I'm going to talk about a topic that actually is going to be the beginning of a series of topics that I'm just going to right now loosely entitle Japan, the Image and the Reality. So today I'm just going to cover briefly three different things that are basically an image that Japan presents to the world, and where the truth of it's a little more complicated. Not necessarily wrong, but more complicated. So the three things are: one, the Japanese have a unique sense of unity with nature. You hear that a lot. The second one is not one I ever really thought of before, but I've had numerous Japanese people tell me that Japan has 4 seasons. And you'll hear Japanese people say this: Japan has 4 seasons. And I'd never really thought about that before because, well, where I come from, there's also 4 seasons. So I wasn't sure what they were really on about at first. We'll get into that. And the third and final one is this. Another thing that you'll hear Japanese people say quite often, and that is Japan is a semi-kuni, meaning semi meaning narrow, kuni meaning country, so narrow country. What does that mean, and is it true? Okay, so to start, this is a beautiful day. I'm driving to Shizuoka, and you can see Fuji-san up there looking absolutely magnificent. It's a view that just never gets old. Yeah, beautiful day to do this. I'm happy to be sharing it with you. So the first, Japan is particularly in tune with nature, and I think that is both true and not true. Being in tune with nature could mean different things to different people. And so I'm not going to say that Japan isn't in tune with nature, but I'm going to give some ideas or reasons why I think that the reality is different than the image people conjure. And that is, Japan has a long and unfortunate history of dealing with natural disasters. What does that mean for this Japan being in tune with nature? Well, a lot of that relationship has been Japan trying to control nature. Now, we could see this in benign ways like bonsai. I mean, think about bonsai, it's almost the perfect image of controlling nature. You take this little plant, you tie wires on it to try to make the tree into a specific shape, you trim it and you grow it in a little pot so it will never get particularly big. Bonsai is controlling nature. And this is done on a large scale in Japanese gardens, people's home gardens or at temple. But it can get out of control. With modern technology and engineering, you've got a Japan that has a lot of concrete hillsides and concreted rivers. And famously in Japanese poetry and old woodblock prints, etc., you have the nobles of yesteryear going out and viewing fireflies, hotaru. And the hotaru, you have to go into the deep countryside if you want to see them today, because they don't live on rivers that are concreted. And in civilized areas like we're driving through at the moment, it's pretty much guaranteed that the rivers are going to be layered in concrete. And I understand why. You still have landslides, mudslides, rocks falling from the hillsides in Japan, and there's a long history of Japanese society dealing with that all over the countryside. So is Japan in tune with nature? Yes and no. Like I said, the truth is more complicated than the image. Second, Japan has 4 seasons. It's true. Japan has a distinct summer, spring, winter, and fall. Don't know why I just said them backwards, but you know what I meant. The Japanese seasons are distinct, and I didn't really understand why that was special, because where I come from, there are 4 distinct seasons as well. But after living here for a while, I realized that it's not that there are 4 distinct seasons that Japan is taking pride in. It's actually the fact that Japan still observes the 4 seasons. And in a way that has largely been lost in other countries around the world. I mean, sure, in America you think of summer and baseball, and you think of fall and Thanksgiving holiday. So there are observations of the seasons, but in Japan, there's still a strong tie to the foods you eat, depending on what season you're in. If it's summer, you're going to have watermelon. If it's the wintertime, it's going to be the little mandarin oranges, mikan season. In the fall, you're going to see the kaki, the persimmons, everywhere. So the fruits and vegetables are very much eaten and enjoyed seasonally. In Japan, it often appears on variety shows, just regular Japanese television. This reinforcement of, oh, it's this season, this is the food we're going to feature on the show, this is the food we're going to have the celebrities eat on the show, and it's showcasing it's fresh, it's the season, it's grown right here in Hokkaido, or right here in Shizuoka, or right here, wherever it's coming from. So, the observation of the seasons, food-wise and holiday-wise, remains strong in Japan in a way that it really doesn't elsewhere. Holidays, I mean, summer is when the matsuri happen, and you have all the people go out and have fun, wear light summer kimono called yukata, and eat street food and watch the men and women carrying the portable shrines. What I've finally come to understand, the pride is not that there's 4 seasons, but that Japan still really actively observes those 4 seasons. And that's something that I've really come to appreciate and enjoy living in Japan. Now, the final issue or point that I want to talk about is Japan as a semai-kuni. Now, there's obvious geographic reasons for this. I mean, Japanese often compare Japan to where I come from. If I'm talking to them, they say, oh, America is hiroi, wide. So America is a wide country, Japan is a narrow country. And that's absolutely true if you compare them. You compare the size, Japan is very small compared to the United States. But in many ways, the narrowness of Japan is often self-imposed. Now, in modern Japan, you really have the situation of the larger metropolises, especially Tokyo, Yokohama, as being especially narrow because of the population density. When you think of Tokyo, you think of crowded trains, crowded streets, crowded restaurants, crowded shops, and it's all true. It is crowded. And Japan's famous demographic issue of falling population is not the case in Tokyo, Yokohama, where the census clearly shows that those 2 cities are still growing. Not through babies being born, but through people moving there. And the reason is simple. This centralization of businesses and government. And as a result, that's where the jobs and the careers are. And so everyone's living here, and it's definitely semai, it's definitely narrow. So we have an emptying countryside, which, there's good and bad points to that. Good for nature, bad for people. but generally speaking. But other things that make Japan a semi-kuni are, even in the countryside, there seems to be a self-imposed narrowness. Now, if you drive across the farm fields of the US, or the Midwest where I'm from, it generally follows a pattern of field, 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 farmhouse, field, 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 and corn, soybeans, wheat, whatever it is. These isolated farmhouses sit amongst those fields. All you have to do is take the bullet train from Tokyo to Kyoto, and as you're crossing prefectures like Shizuoka, you'll see these small villages, smaller towns, and the pattern you see there is field, 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 cluster of houses, field, field, field. So in amidst the rice fields or the soy fields or whatever they are, people are still building their houses in close proximity to each other, even though they could have larger yards, larger space surrounding their homes, but they don't. One thing that Japan has trouble with is lots of old derelict buildings, homes and shops that have been shuttered and essentially have become run down over a series of years and decades. And the problem with that is twofold. One, there are obvious eyesores and fire hazards. The next major earthquake could collapse these, they can catch on fire, there's big issues with it. Making the problem worse is a lot of these structures and plots of lands, the ownership is either disputed or completely unknown. The owners have died or forgot they own this land, or it's passed down to children who didn't realize it passed down to them. And so you've got these stores and houses that have just been abandoned and no one knows who owns them. And the government really has had no ability to take over these. And so you see this issue in small towns where you have what are called shattadori, which is shutter street, where there's all these little shops and 2/3 of them are shuttered. And I'll be driving past and I'll think, wow, that's a cute little shop. I'd love to stop and see what's in there. But I can't stop and see what's in there because there's no place to stop. Parking is always an issue, especially around these shatadoris. And it would be an easy fix if these derelict buildings could be bought and turned into parking spaces. As it is, those little shops are only open to the local residents and if they happen to be within walking distance of a train station. But most aren't. And that's why those businesses die. So there you go. 3 images of Japan: that they love nature, that there are 4 seasons, and that it's a semi-narrow country, that where the reality is a little bit more complicated than the image. And I hope you enjoyed this explanation, and that if you ever thought about these things before, it'll all make a little more sense to you. I hope you enjoyed this lovely day that I'm driving through, and all these beautiful sakura with Mount Fuji in the background. And thanks for watching. Please hit the like button. If you thought this was interesting and you want to see more content, please subscribe. And until next time,